Hello and welcome to Six Figure Authors, the show that helps you take your writing career to the next level. I'm Lindsay and I'm here with my two co-hosts.
I'm Joe Lalo.
And I'm Andrea Pearson.
And today we're going to be talking about whether or not you need to pay for advertising these days as an author and what to do if you feel you need to advertise but you don't have the money for it. And we'll also talk a little bit about how much we spend, where we buy ads, and we'll finish up by answering some of your questions on the subject that we snagged from the Facebook group. So thank you. People submitted a lot of questions. I think we've got a few down and we may end up doing a part 2 or something because there were a lot of good questions and some of them we even know the answers to. And some of them will BS our way through it because that's how we roll here. Before we jump into the main subject, Andrea, do you have any good news to share with us or news at all? Maybe not good news. It is Andrea who always has an issue. Poor Andrea.
I was going to say, good news, I found my lights. So look, that's my light right there. And then right over here. So I won't look blue as the night goes on. So that's good news. But my surgery got scheduled for the 20th, 5 days before Josh's wedding. I'm not happy about that, but I haven't done a whole lot of book related stuff recently. We've been working on a lot of DIY stuff and packing and getting settled in, just basically so that we can be ready for my surgery and not have a lot of loose ends and boxes everywhere still, which there are still boxes everywhere. But like we've a bunch of our DIY projects have been a lot of really fun. Like we spray painted our countertops. That was a lot of fun. like the countertops before were just so ugly, just like this yellowy browny tan, it just looks like somebody vomited all over them. And no matter how clean they are, they look dirty. No matter how clear they are, they look cluttered. Anyway, that was a lot of fun. They turned out really great. The end result, if anybody wants to see pictures, you can ask me in the Facebook group and I will post. But yeah, we are laying vinyl planking in the kitchen. That's what I was doing all day today. So my fingertips are all bruised now from, cutting and measuring and prying into place. And anyway, so I'm waiting for one of my narrator to get fixes done, and then I'll have another audiobook to upload. And I'm super excited about that. It's been a lot of fun having this project to work on, this whole narration thingy.
As for me, I'm hoping to get book 3 of my new epic fantasy. It's called The Greater Land Saga, wrapped up and sent out to the editor. Again, I have an editing slot in early October, and I'm almost 80,000 words into a book that I had intended to be 100,000. So as long as I don't go wildly over length, then I'm going to have this thing finished up in a few days, and we'll be able to do a nice long revision to make sure that it's nice. I'm doing something weird with this one. I was having some trouble staying focused. It's an epic, so there's at least 3 points of view. And what I normally do is just have them lined up and break it up into chapters and write it the way that it will be read. But in this case, I decided to halfway through just finish writing one point of view and then go through and finish writing the other points of view. And that will make it a little bit more difficult to line up the events. But as long as I put in some wiggle room where, travel time is concerned, so things can line up better. So I think we'll see how well that goes. And as for, I got a message from my cover guy. I've been having a really hard time scheduling cover lately. For some reason, all of my artists have been super busy, and I had the good luck of having my cover guy contact me just as I hit the 3/4 mark on this book. So I might actually get this thing released, within a few weeks of the edit. I was afraid it was going to creep over into next year, which would have not been terrible, but it wouldn't have been ideal. So again, as long as I don't screw up and go too far over, then I'm right on track with my year's releases, which is probably the first time in 3 years that I can say that.
I have definitely also done that with many POV books. You start writing one storyline and you're just super into that storyline, and you sort of, meanwhile, back at the ranch, you just leave that until like this later. And yeah, it can make it challenging lining things up for sure. I've had that experience, but I don't know, sometimes you kind of, it's a little easier, I find, to stick with the story and keep going instead of jumping around. So I think that's understandable. And Andrea, I have watched many episodes of the Home and Garden, everything on the Home and Garden channel, and I have not seen spray painting countertops on any of them. So clearly you're doing something unique and stylish you should probably have a TikTok channel talking about it. That could be your new thing.
Wow, TikTok. I would do one video and then I'd be like, yeah, I'm done.
All right. Well, for my news, nothing too big. I'm getting ready. I'm actually on a road trip. You can, if you're watching the video and wondering why there's actually decorations on the wall that are not dragons, I'm on the road. But yeah, I'm getting ready to put up for pre-order the first two, I don't even know what you call them, contemporary fantasy stories with witches and werewolves. I started out calling them like witch cozies or werewolf cozies, which is not even a thing, but they're not, there's a little bit of a mystery. So these were not written to market, needless to say. So we'll see how they do. These were just, I needed a break this summer from the heavier epic fantasy. I mean, all three of these together add up to the word count of book 2 in my epic fantasy series. So they were a nice refresher, and I didn't invest a lot of time or money in them. So if they don't do tremendously well, that's fine. If they do tremendously well on very inexpensive covers, that will be an it figures moment. Whereas here's the expensive epic fantasy covers and editing because they're so long. So we shall see. Also, I am finally releasing an audiobook bundle of my very first series, The Emperor's Edge. This was kind of a wax series because I started with one narrator. She did 3 books and then she got busy with life, and then I switched to another narrator who I've now used for a lot of stuff. And it always bothered me, that mid-series switch. Only rarely would the fans say something about it, but it bothered me. So now I had her paid a fortune, so hopefully these will pan out because these are not short books. Had her re-record the first 3. So I had the same narrator all the way through, and I'm gonna, for the first time, going through ACX self-publishing, have a 3-book bundle to lead off an audiobook series. So I'm going to see how it does, because that's been pretty effective on the series I have with Podium, especially my Dragon Blood series. And wouldn't it be great if ACX came up and said, hey, we want to include your new bundle in our Audible Plus subscription service now? I say, wouldn't that be great? Because that made a huge difference in sales, sell through to the rest of that series and earnings, even with me just getting a cut from the publisher instead of getting everything. So I would love that opportunity, but we'll see. I haven't really heard of them approaching any indie authors yet and saying, hey, we want to put your stuff in there. Or if they do, I'm not sure they ask if they ask permission, but we'll see. They could take mine without permission. Ah, ha, ha. But yeah, before we jump into the advertising, the main topic, I actually was going on Dave Chesson's blog because we're going to have him on the show here in a few weeks. And he had a pretty recent article on, does Amazon give preferential treatment to new books? And I thought it was worth, I grabbed out a whole bunch of stuff that I'm going to make Joe read just because that's the kind of day I'm having. Joe volunteered nicely to read some quotes from it. And of course, we'll link to the article in the show notes so you can check it out. But it does kind of play into how your advertising strategy, what you might want to adopt. So hopefully you'll find it somewhat interesting, and I'll hand it over to Joe.
Okie dokie. I do not promise a superior read, merely that I will provide relief in this case. Okay, so for years, authors have speculated as to whether or not Amazon gives preferential treatment to new books. Some authors, after seeing their sales plummet weeks or months after launch, point to this as a sign that they have hit an unseen Amazon cliff, while others claim that this is merely a post-book launch strategy effect, where after you're done employing your strongest book strategies, there's only natural sales. It's only natural for sales to drop. So this leaves the question, do new books get preferential treatment from Amazon? And if so, what does this look like and what can we do to counter it? He basically did an experiment with 100 books plus 100 plus books using the scraper / crawler tool he has. And okay.
Sorry, that was my aside. That was my aside when I thought I was going to be reading it. But yeah, this was just Dave did an experiment, and he gathers all kinds of data because he does Publisher Rocket, and so he actually can go out and scrape and get the actual data from Amazon. So that was just me pointing that out, that he wasn't pulling these numbers out of thin air.
Okay. I use that, by the way. It's one of the only like official post tools that I actually picked up and get some good use out of. All right, so as we learned in the popularity effect experiment, another of his experiments with data from Amazon, when you show Amazon increased consistent sales and relevant popularity, Amazon starts to put you in more keywords and thus shows your book more often. We took this a step further and analyzed whether or not the age of a book affects this. Do new books get better traction with Amazon, or is it just a product of a marketing push and that's it? The results. Number one, new books do get a noticeable bump in Amazon's attention or popularity, and do show up more often for more keywords and better rankings over older books with similar sales. I'm calling this bump in sales, or for newer books, the honeymoon factor. Number two, the level of significance in the honeymoon factor varied greatly between different books, so I can't say there is a generic number like a 20% boost for all new books. Number three, those books that appeared to have a solid launch plan and brought in lots of traffic/sales received an even stronger nonlinear response by Amazon in increasing its popularity throughout the website. Thus, a larger honeymoon factor was at play. This in turn caused more sales, and on it continued until a point was reached. 4. In most cases, there was a noticeable drop at some point in the number of keywords a book ranked for, even though the sales didn't decrease as much or as proportionately. This looks like when the honeymoon factor was removed, considering there was no noticeable reason for it. After the drop through sales followed the number, which would be because the lower amount of times the book showed up in Amazon after the removal of the honeymoon factor. Number 5, books that showed consistent strong sales during their launch received a longer period of the honeymoon factor, which is basically a longer honeymoon period, ooh la la, than other books that didn't. Lindsay, you want to fill in your thoughts here?
Sure, sure. And there were a couple of weirdly constructed sentences in there. That wasn't Joe's reading. So that's probably why I was stumbling over it too when I was reading. Sorry, Dave. We will get the lowdown for sure from him when he comes on the show. But yeah, so I just wanted to, I thought this was worth pointing out because you kind of hear some authors talking about the cliff on Amazon. Well, you get a big boost in sales in the first, then there's like the 30-day cliff, or it's the 60-day cliff, or the 90. Nobody could ever agree. And I think this confirms kind of my beliefs and my experiences. I've had this happen with some books, some book ones of a new series, where it did well. I was able to keep it like in between maybe 100 and 200 in ranking in the Amazon store. And this is all Amazon centric, guys. So we don't know if this is happening on the other bookstores. But with books where I was able to do that for a couple of weeks, and then they just kind of took off and they stayed sticky for a longer time, long after I was done, you know, promoting to my newsletter. And some of this was even before I got more heavily into Amazon ads. And usually Amazon ads only adds a little bit. It's really hard to just get to this level of sales that you need for this kind of thing, just based on sort of the pay-per-click ads by themselves. But I've seen, then with other books, I've seen it to much lesser extents or kind of not at all. And you could tell like this is one that maybe it didn't do as well, so they didn't give it as much of a push. It wasn't quite what the market was looking for or something like that. One where I had the really good luck with was my Heritage of Power series, which was a spin-off of my Dragon Blood series. When I've talked about how even though that series is not in Kindle Select, it's not exclusive, that series has always done well for me. But so I've seen this in play. And so when people kind of poo-poo it, I'm like, no, it's really a thing, but it's not going to work with every book. And honestly, if you can't give it a pretty good push at the beginning, it's probably not going to work to the extent that you hear people talk about it. I've had it work to a lesser extent earlier on in my career when I didn't have as many fans and readers. Like I remember Balance on the Blade's Edge. I put that out at like $2.99. That was a fantasy romance kind of thing. And it stuck in like the top 1,000 to 2,000 in the store for a while, which for me was good at the time. And again, it was beyond me pushing it. That was before AMS ads, Amazon ads were even a thing. And I don't think I was doing Facebook ads at the time either. So I've certainly had it, like I said, not work with every book. So that's why it's no guarantee, but I feel like it's worth playing the game, like giving it a shot, because it can be tremendous money from that long tail if you're able to get the ball rolling and Amazon kind of keeps it rolling. And this is why I cringe a little bit when people say they're just going to release their books and then wait till they have more books out to start advertising and pushing them. And Andrea, I know you're going to rebut this because Andrea's like, I got to do it. That's how I do it. And you know, that's fine. That's totally people's choice. But I guess what I cringe is when people advise other people to do that. Because if you have the time and energy and you have a little money to put in advertising and you want to do mailing list swaps with other authors, things like that, it's like I said, it's not a guarantee, but if it works, it's really like, wow, that's all of a sudden kind of a game changer, at least for a few months with the kind of income you could be bringing in, especially if you do have more books coming out in this series afterwards. So that's why I usually advise people just take a stab, even if it's your first book, do everything you can within reason at launch. Don't take out loans or rack up credit card debt or anything to throw a whole bunch of ad money at something that's not proven yet. But, if you do what you can, and, if you don't have the energy for that when it comes to a launch, maybe that might be a time when it makes sense to save the book until you have got more out and you do have more time and energy that you can kind of devote to the launch of book one. And the whole point of that is just to say that it's never going to be easier, at least on Amazon, to get things rolling and sell a lot of copies of a book than during that launch period. I've run sales later on and tried and given it like a big push, and it's not that that can't help. And it can certainly like kickstart something, get it selling a little bit, but I've never seen anything take off to that degree as it possibly can at the launch. Again, if you're kind of written a book that's really resonates with the market. All right, you guys can give your thoughts on that.
Because my earnings haven't been super high of late, it's always a little difficult to tell if a lackluster launch is due to just the generally lower tide created by my other books versus lackluster launch tactics. That said, while I usually don't have a rapid enough release to consider holding off on advertising book one until I have books 2 or 3 out, this time I did, and the launch wasn't substantially improved by doing a soft launch of book one and a bigger push a month later when book 2 came out. Now, again, that's potentially evidence that any read-through boost I got from having something to funnel readers to was sort of eaten up by the fact that I wasn't getting that honeymoon effect on the first book, or it could be that I just didn't have enough readers overall to get any sort of algorithmic bump. So again, when you have much larger, the larger your numbers, the larger your data set, the easier it is to make a determination on this thing. So you get a lot of noise in a smaller launch. So I typically will put a little bit of advertising behind any launch, and we'll talk about this a little bit later in the question answer section. But I probably will continue to do, like, let's say I probably won't hold off on advertising book one at least a little bit in the future, because I feel like it's not a huge investment, and I didn't see a huge increase in holding off in the past.
Joe, I love how your headset like creates like this little gap between your head and the background. Yeah. Anyway, so I've always noticed a small bump, sometimes a big bump when I've released books, and having it confirmed definitely makes me wish I could focus on bigger launches. I don't know. I mean, you guys all know that like my life is always constantly crazy. Like if I waited to release a book until I had time to make a big push, I wouldn't release very often still. And it would be like I would release like 3 or 4 books at the same time. And this is like where I'm like, my experiences are so different from other people's. Like, I don't understand why does it go differently for me? Because the launches where I've pushed hard, even on books that have hit the market well, have not done nearly as well as big promotions I've run on the same books after my series have been published for a while. So I'm grateful that I've been able to get so much movement on old books. But I don't understand. I really don't understand. Like my biggest promotions are the ones that have, I don't know where I was going with that thought, but my biggest promotions have always done better than my biggest launches, and like by huge margins, like huge margins. And so I'm like, maybe I just don't have enough confidence in new releases, like, because a lot, excuse me, a lot of the sites require you to have a certain number of reviews. And even if I have a certain number of reviews, I don't know. I still don't have a lot of confidence in my newest books. And so I wait until it hits the market, until I can, see how people react to it. And then I tailor all my advertising based around that, what I learned from that. So anyway, I do things backwards. I'm not ashamed of it. It's worked for me. I do wish that I could figure things out though, so I could just, be more in with the cool people.
Well, I want to add too that I feel like it's kind of soul crushing when you throw everything at it and you really do have like a good sized newsletter and you do swaps and stuff, and it doesn't really take off the way you see like when other people release at the same time as you, and there goes, there shoots straight up to the moon, and you're like, huh. And I don't think they tell you like, oh, I didn't even barely try it. I just emailed my list, and you're like, let me get the daggers. So that is tough. And like I said, I have done this often enough now where I've seen it both ways, where it, my epic fantasy that I launched in April, it did okay, but I didn't feel like it really had a big, it didn't have, like, last year, the Heritage of Power series was 2018. Last year I did the book one and I've Death Before Dragons series, Sinister Magic, right as COVID was starting out. So I thought it totally flopped, but it did have like a pretty good first couple of weeks where it stayed up there. That one was 99 cents. So that's always something to factor into. It's always going to be easier to get those 99-cent sales. And if you have book two at full price coming right after, that can help. But so it's kind of hard to tell always, going ahead, is this one really going to do well or is it not? And sometimes they just do not, no matter how much you think you know about what the market wants. Usually it's the ones you don't expect to do that great that can kind of surprise you, or that's my experience anyway. Maybe people that are better at being calculating and have really got it nailed down. Really, honestly, if you just, the people that read tons and tons in the genre and like really see what's doing well, they've probably got a much better shot than someone like me who kind of bounces around. This week I'm reading sci-fi romance. Next week I'm reading nonfiction. I'm not stalking the top 100s for the subgenres I write in. All right, but we did promise you talk about advertising, so let's jump into that topic now. Do you need to advertise as an author? There's our first question here in 2021 as we're recording this. So this, just to preface this is all geared towards independent authors, self-published authors. If you are traditionally published, I would not spend money on advertising at all. The math is not in your favor because the publisher is taking too much of a cut for you to earn back what you spend. Hopefully they are spending money on it, and that should be the case. I see traditional publishers getting BookBub ads for their authors and the like. So this is kind of geared towards indie authors, and some of the basic things. Even if you're trad published, you want to get a website. You're going to post on the social media places of your preference, hopefully where your readers are, and get a mailing list. And you have to pay a little bit for those things, but I wouldn't pay for anything else. You can do like group promotions and things with other authors, the newsletter swaps we were talking about, things that don't cost a lot of money. And but for indie authors, it has definitely gotten to the point where it's tough to be seen without advertising. So if you have money and can at least dabble in it, I would recommend it. There's very inexpensive books out there on Amazon ads and Facebook ads. And of course, if you're feeling wealthy, there's some excellent courses. Of course, Mark Dawson, we're not affiliates, but that's a big, beefy course, like everything you could possibly want to know. I did parts of it last year. I kind of jumped around. It's actually overwhelming how big it is. So, but yeah, he's got everything in there at this point now. So if you want to do that route too, but you could just start out with like a $4.99 book off of Amazon or wherever and get started and tinker around a little bit. But and if you do not have, like we were talking about this whole thing on Dave Cheston's blog, how the honeymoon period is you're most likely to get an extra boost around the launch. So if you have limited funds, I would wait it towards the launch. Is that 2 weeks right around the release of the book? You're going to try to stagger it. Hopefully you're getting a newsletter built up, email those folks. Hopefully you're getting Facebook or whatever social media kind of built up a little bit, post on there maybe the next day. And if you can get a few posts, we'll talk about too, not everything's Amazon ads. There's also all the sponsorship sites still. eReader News Today, Robin Reads, Book Barbarian for sci-fi and fantasy. If you're feeling rich, you can try to get the BookBub new release one. They're very choosy with that one, and that's more expensive than the other ones. But a lot of the sites will advertise new releases as long as you have other books that have a good review rating. So you don't have to have reviews yet on the book when you submit it. But yeah, so kind of do those things. And then you might want to jump in and try to get some ads going at the same time. And if you get to the point where you're consistently making money from your books, you can also keep some ads running all the time. Like maybe it's only $5 or $10 a day. But that can make sense if by doing that, you're able to earn $10 or $15 a day. Ideally you want to cover that and put some money in your pocket. But as far as whether or not you don't have to advertise at all, we'll talk about this a little bit in the next section, but just realize that it's going to be tough. You're really going to have to grind and kind of figure some stuff out. I always recommend giving away free books because those are kind of a way to, there's still people out there looking for free books that are not being advertised for the most part. So they're not being served necessarily by the ads they see. All right, Joe, do you have any thoughts on, do you have to pay for advertising?
Sure. I can say pretty confidently that over the course of my career, I've probably spent the least on advertising out of this group. And I'm certainly not burning up the charts, but I could benefit from more ads and a better ad strategy. But I exist as evidence that you can get by on very little advertising, but it sort of depends upon a handful of things. You need to have developed a degree of following, either by having some lucky, windfalls in the past or just slow, steady build. You should have a deep catalog, so you've got a lot of long tail going to keep you afloat, in between book releases. And you need to take full advantage of whatever promotion that you do. You're going to get sales bumps off of either lucky bits of promotion like blogs picking up your book, or the actual promotion you do. And you need to really, take advantage and find ways to hold on to those readers who've discovered you, which, links in the back for newsletter and all that. For several years of my career, including my 3 most profitable years, my promotion was limited to a single BookBub feature per year and 1 boosted post per book release. That was the entirety of my promo. Hitting a niche and putting out books semi-regularly with a dash of good luck has given me over 10 years of income, 7 of those years full-time income. And again, I, to this day, don't usually have an ongoing ad strategy. So you can absolutely have a career without advertising, but it is a hard scrabble existence sometimes, and getting good at ads is by far preferable.
I agree with that. I love doing ads. They're really fun. So advertising and running ads like my own and the various websites and putting together big promotions is basically what I do. I don't have as much time as I used to, obviously, but I'm almost always planning my next big event. And those events just make me so excited. Like there's nothing I love more than nothing I love more than planning a big event, including like the lead up, the promotion, like newsletter swaps. And the way I usually do it is, I'll set things up so that I'm having my smallest websites have them deliver the book first, and then leading up to the bigger ones as much as I can control that. And I include newsletter swaps throughout that. And I include Facebook ads throughout that, so that none of those are, lurking variables or whatever, just the same thing all the way throughout. And anyway, so I made my 6 figures a year by being smart about marketing. I realized early on that I consistently wrote books and chose genres and ages and markets and all of that. I mean, I just did things wrong. And I just, I made it a lot harder than it needed to be. And I found that I would never be able to release quickly as like my friends were, or in the same genres as them, anything like that. I mean, middle grade fantasy compared to contemporary romance, there's a huge difference in that. Muted my mic to cough. There's a huge difference in audiences between those two. Anyway, so if I wanted to make money as an author, I needed to learn how to market. And once I got a taste for success, I was hooked. I mean, like hooked. And I found out later that my mom loves marketing and that she wanted to major in marketing, but her mom wouldn't let her. Oh, parents, they're so controlling. Anyway, so I love planning big events that happen when I release the last book in a series, or when something big happens in the world, or when a random holiday is coming up. Like for Arbor Day, I arranged a multi-author event for fantasy books that specifically mentioned trees. And I would do this regularly in the past for lots of different random holidays. And it was a lot of fun. And so I recommend you get creative with this sort of thing and find authors in similar situations who write your subgenre and get them involved with you. Even if it doesn't result in a ton of downloads, it helps other authors start to recognize your name, which leads to future opportunities where they may decide to pay it back. And honestly, some of my best author events where, like, I think I talked about this one before, where I got together with about 8 other authors and we all shared our books with each other's with our newsletters. And that was a really big event for us. It went really well. Most of those authors were ones that I had promoted in a multi-author event in some way. And so just start small, work with what you've got, get to know authors, and just just, work with other people and have fun with it. Anyway, that's my answer.
Right, and we're gonna now go into the topic of what if you can't afford any advertising, and just playing off what Andrea said, a lot of times if you're willing, like if you're a newer author and you don't have a very big mailing list, people aren't necessarily going to be courting you and saying like, hey, Andrea, come sign up for this. Let's do a multi-author box set of our book ones in the fantasy tree subgenre. But if you volunteer to do the organization and handle everything, a lot of times that can kind of get you in the door with authors that are ahead of you as far as more books out, more readers, that kind of thing. But to realize, and I don't want to say you can't make it today without advertising. It's harder. Like when the three of us got started, there actually weren't really any advertising options. So it was frustrating in a different way. Whereas you either hit it out of the blocks. I don't know, what's the expression? Something like you either did well because you had a really cool cover and you had a good blog and it was kind of what the market wanted, or you were just struggling that, let me try to make it free. Let me see what I can do to get some people to find my book, because there is no way to advertise. So it's almost the same. Whereas today, if you don't have those things and you don't have the money, you're really frustrated because you see people like there's their ads and there's their books selling really well. So obviously it must be a result of the ads, possibly they're helping, but to some extent it's like what Joe was talking about, where some of it is just authors have built up a fan base over time, so they're getting a good boost right out of the gates. That's the expression. So what can you do though if you don't have a lot of money to spend? This is where I really like to suggest, and I would suggest doing this even if you do have money to spend on ads, because it's really easy to burn through money really quickly, especially with the pay-per-click kind of stuff. So write the prequel / tie-in, short story, novella, etc. that goes with your book or your series. Do invest in getting it a cover. It can be a pre-made cover, less expensive, that kind of thing, and having it edited, and then plan to give it away for free with an excerpt in the back with a link to the book one that you're trying to sell the series. And maybe do two story tie-in stories like that, or three. One can be to give away as a bonus to anyone who signs up for your newsletter. So anybody who gets to the back of the book and says, oh, I totally want that thing about that one character, and so they'll sign up. Maybe another story is just to give away for free in all the stores. I've talked about before how that's kind of the first thing I did that started moving the dial, was a tie-in short story that was for free on Barnes & Noble and Smashwords, because I didn't know yet how to make stuff free on Amazon. And then maybe the third thing is another story that you can either do as a bonus in like one of these group promos or newsletter swaps that you can find on BookFunnel or Story Origin at one of these sites. Or again, you could also say to other authors, hey, let's do an anthology, and I'll do all the work and promoting, and you guys might actually make some money off it if you make it like 99 cents. So your short story wouldn't necessarily have to be for free. But again, the whole point of putting these together is to put at the end of the story. And you can find out how these characters met. Why are they snipping and snarking at each other? Well, you got to read the book, and there's a link to the book. So just more footwork that, if you have a lot of money to spend on ads, like you can get away with doing less of that kind of thing. But all that stuff will help you gain fans and make, put more content out there, more ways to discover you. So it's not a bad idea, even if you do have money to spend. Do you guys have thoughts to add?
Sure. There's a couple of minor advertising hits that don't cost anything and are legitimately advertising hits, but they both sort of depend upon you doing at least a little bit of minor groundwork beforehand, and sometimes major groundwork, depending on, the more you do, the more effective it'll be. One of them is BookBub will do a new release alert for a new book for free, but the new release alert only goes to people who follow you on the BookBub platform. Now, if you've ever had a BookBub featured ad, which is, again, very difficult to get and very expensive, but if you ever have, you probably have a ton of followers on BookBub, because a lot of people just click, oh, I like that book, let me be aware of others. But you can also just sort of solicit people, make it one of your action items for people to follow you on BookBub. Just try to lead people to be BookBub followers, and then when you have a new release, they'll all get that new release thing. Amazon does this too. Amazon, I believe you still can follow authors on Amazon, but I think Amazon also just pulls from a list of people who have sort of purchased your stuff before. So this is a little bit out of your hands. But again, this is a new release alert that goes out automatically. I know that Lindsay in the past has had that actually foil some of her advertising strategies by letting people know a little bit too early that a book was out. But again, those are automatically provided. Important, you have to, in both of these cases, particularly in the BookBub case, because it's not automatic, you have to actually add your book as soon as possible to the library on BookBub. And you're basically, once you've done this, you can start nudging people toward being, following you on BookBub and Amazon, and then new releases will have an automatic hit. It's almost like a featured ad, except very, very targeted to people who already bought your stuff. So again, work on it, but it's advertising.
The end. Okay. So Lindsay's I was going to say Lindsay has talked about this in the past, but she just talked about it just now. So if you plan an event or a box set specifically, and you arrange everything, you can approach bigger authors and ask them to put a book in it or whatever. And that's a fantastic thing to do. And then my advice is to put in the hours. If you don't have money, you need to put in time to get your book selling, and not just work, but smart work. Also recognize that there's a reason more successful authors put money toward advertising instead. And that's because the time you do, or the things that you do that you'll put time towards, don't have as big of a result sometimes, a lot of the time, that as advertising would do or would be or whatever. But you do need to start somewhere and getting a little traction where you aren't having any as exciting and can make a big difference. So like getting $50 of royalties where you would have only gotten $10 means you can pay for a website to help out the next time around. And then it's also moralizing, which is the opposite of demoralizing.
Yeah, there's kind of comes a time too when it becomes not worth your time to do the little things that will only add a little bit of a boost. Like, you're going to make more if you spend that time writing the next book and getting another book out earlier. But usually in the beginning, you don't have anybody buying your books, so it doesn't matter as much if you get a whole bunch of books out. You need to put the work into trying to get some readers and make some fans, so that there will be those eager people waiting to buy your next book when it comes out. And once the ball gets rolling, farther along the way, maybe you get to the point where all you're doing for a new release of a book is emailing your list and throwing up maybe some announcements on your social media sites and starting some ads, and you don't do a whole lot more than that. I generally, at this point, as a fairly prolific author, do more effort into book one of a new series, and then for subsequent books in the series, it's usually just mailing my list and emailing the people on my list, which I just said twice, and also doing like Facebook posts. But I will say too, with Joe's comment on the Amazon thing, they seem to be kind of erratic whether they send out something or not. But it is triggered, I believe, just by the follow, because I have some authors that, how you stalk people from time to time because they're doing well in your genre or whatever, and you want to see what's going on there. I've followed people before that I've never actually made purchases from, and Amazon will happily send me the new release alerts. Interestingly, I think I may have it turned off in my settings somewhere, but I don't get new alerts from like authors I've purchased a lot from but have not followed. So I don't know, it could just be me. Could be I turned something off somewhere because I was like, I don't want any more email from Amazon. But moving on, so how much should you be spending? This is kind of something that comes up often in forums and stuff, and authors like to argue about it. Assuming you do have some money to spend in ads, assuming you're making some money from your books and you want to know how much you should be reinvesting back into the business. I'm just going to say, I don't think there's a right answer here. I've seen successful authors say they spend $500,000 a year to make $1 million a year. And I've seen successful authors say they don't spend hardly anything. This seems to be more viable if you write quickly and you've gotten something new in the stores every month, but you should experiment and see what works for you. Again, there are not many cases where I think it's a good idea to like rack up a credit card bill to, try to finance your new release. An exception would be somebody who is already selling piles. Like it took off. You had that, you got lucky or you were so smart that you had something kind of take off organically and you want to boost it to try to keep it going. And you're going to get that money in 2 months because of the way things work, obviously. So that could be an exception, but in whether or not you should do it, it's just how much you should do. it's really up to you. Like, because, you know, we had that interview with Sean Inman. He was doing well, but then advertising was something that helped him take it to the next level and start making more, you know, kind of more than he was spending just on the ads. Like, he was spent X and made X plus Y or whatever extra. So that's something where you can be worth experimenting with, even if you haven't been spending much. As for how much we spend or how much I spend, these last couple years, I've been spending more because I've started leaving Amazon ads running all the time. I used to do them around the launches of a new series and then kind of let them run for a couple months and then just turn everything off and focus on finishing the series and writing the next thing. And so it's gone up for me from about 5% of my gross income to about 10% of my gross income. And it's actually, since almost all my ad money goes towards Amazon.com, you know, I've experimented with the other stores and not gained as much traction or not seen as much as a result, or just been a little bit lazy and not gotten all that into like tracking it obsessively and following it up as obsessively as in the .com store. But so because of that, it's probably more like 15% is going towards 15% I'm spending on what's actually coming in from that particular spot, Amazon.com, on ebooks, because I barely spend anything, next to nothing, on advertising audiobooks, and those have become a decent source of income. So I am fortunate that I make good money, you know, gross good money from the book. So it's actually probably more than you would think that. You're like, oh, 10%, that's not much. Like if you were making less and you spend 50%, you know, that sounds like a lot, but it's probably numerically less. So I now spend more on ads than I ever spent at a day job before I became an author. So there's that. It feels really weird. I have to remind myself I'm a business. I'm not just like a person. I mean, I am a person, sort of, possibly an android or something. I don't know, alien from another planet. But I will say, since I have started leaving ads running all the time, the dips are less extreme. Like it kind of can help things that a newer series kind of continue to sell a little better or longer. But at the same time, spending more hasn't resulted in me blowing past my all-time highs by a lot as far as earnings per year. Like last year was I think my best year, you know, gross, and slightly my best year net too, but I attribute it more to lots of releases last year in a series that did pretty well rather than my brilliance with running ads, because we all know that is not a thing. Again, just be careful with overspending. You know, since we get paid, we know kind of 2 months out how much we're going to get paid. But I'm always terrified because I've been in this long enough now to have seen numerous people get kicked off of the platform with like no recourse. So you don't want to have spent 20,000 on ads banking on getting that money, and then they're just like, oh, sorry, we believe you. You know, you've somehow triggered our algorithm, and you know, hopefully only the people get kicked out that were actually doing something fishy, but there are certainly people who will say staunchly that they were not, and that it just something was going on that was beyond their control. I do not know. I don't judge. I will say that I think that after time, you probably will not need to spend, say, 70% of your gross on advertising, because eventually you're going to have a big enough fan base that you're going to get a lot of your sales basically for free, because you're going to have people that come into the new stuff and then go read the back stuff. And, you know, you don't have to pay to advertise that to get those sales. So that doesn't cost you any money. But yeah, that's just my thoughts on that. I will pass it on to Joe.
I mean, the short answer for how much you should be spending on advertising is less than you make from advertising. It's a two-pronged problem to solve, though. First, you have to learn how much you're making from advertising, and it's not as simple as looking at what Amazon tells you, and it's simpler to look at what Amazon tells you than everything else, every other kind of advertising, because Amazon's one of the only ones that can definitively say whether or not an ad led to a sale. So figuring out how much you're making from advertising can be really tricky. It's a lot of trial and error. You're going to be doing a lot of record keeping, and it's going to take a lot of patience. You're almost certain to lose at least a little bit of money on advertising in the very beginning, because even following all the best advice, you're probably going to be doing some A/B testing. A/B testing, by definition, means you're going to be running twice as many ads as you expect to run, and half of them are going to underperform. Like, you're going to choose the ones that perform best and put more money into those. That's A/B testing. So yeah, like when I say you need to be making more money than you're spending on advertising, that's not true at the beginning. At the beginning of any ad campaign, you're probably going to be losing money. So now you have to calibrate your ad campaign to make up the money you lost at the beginning of the campaign. So it can get tremendously complex. And really, I think the first step toward anybody's ad strategy is to get really good at determining how well advertising is performing. Because if you have that skill, then you can actually make a successful ad campaign. Whereas if you don't have that skill, you might not be making money even when you think that you are. So figure out record keeping and then figure out advertising.
I concur. I just watched Catch Me If You Can. Do you concur? I concur. Why didn't I concur? Such a great show. And this is where I'm going to get on a soapbox, guys. Okay. There's absolutely nothing shameful in advertising. There's nothing shameful in putting 50% of your money to it, or 10% or 70%, because every business needs advertising for people to find out about it. Like Joe just said, you can't start, you have to like do something in the beginning. You can't just expect people to find you without you doing something and putting some money towards it. The same is true for authors. I'm tired of people saying, yeah, he made 6 figures on his books, but how much of that did he have to spend to get there? That's called jealousy, and it don't look good on anyone. But basically shaming authors who are successful and assuming right away that they had to spend a ton of money to make any money. It's just really annoying. I see that a lot. I mean, people post in, like 20 books, 50K, I'm making this much, and this is how much I'm putting towards advertising. And people, I always see these little snide comments like, yeah, I mean, gosh, he had to put like 30% to advertising. He had to put 50%. I'm like, guys, it doesn't matter. He's making an ROI. That is the whole point of advertising. But that said, I would bet that there are ways to get our ad spend down while still making good money. It might require taking a serious look at our craft to see why people aren't buying without significant investment on our part, or it might be that our books would do that well anyway, and we don't need to put as much money towards advertising. And then sometimes there's like this big hurdle we need to jump over to get to the next bracket, like Lindsay was talking about with Sean Inman. He had spent a bit to get up to the next bracket, but then he got up to the next bracket and he was making more money, and so it made it all worthwhile in the end. So you just experiment around. Don't be afraid to switch things up unless you know something is working really well, and then pay attention to what other authors in your subgenre are doing. And I think I've recommended this before, but go and like authors fan page, like just go like a bunch of people in your subgenre, their fan pages on Facebook, and then Facebook will eventually start targeting you with those indie authors. Like I get targeted by Mackenzie what's her face's ads, and what is her last name? I can't remember, and Lindsay Hall and things like that. And I love that because I love seeing what they are doing with their ads, because that helps me, with mine.
Yeah, I've definitely seen people post on forums that like they see somebody's like, oh, I made 500,000. Well, that person must have spent 400,000 in order to make 500,000. But they don't seem to realize, well, even if that was true, which is probably not, where'd they get the 400,000 from? Some of the success of previous books. None of us, 99% of us are not like trust fund babies. Even if those are the people that lose all their money the quickest when they start advertising. It's actually better if you start before you've made it big, because each dollar counts. So you're really going to be paying attention. What is the average cost of sales? Am I doing this right? It's worse when you have more money because you just throw it out there and you're like, whatever, there's 20,000. Well, I guess that one didn't work very well. So it's actually start earlier if you can. I will say I never break even complete. I never am able to, the way Amazon works, especially maybe in Facebook too, where you're paying let's say you're paying 30 cents a click, or realistically, if you're in a more expensive genre, it's $1 a click, right? Or maybe even more for romance. You're not going to make every click. Let's say you get 1 in 10. 1-10, or you're really good, you get 1 in 8. 1 in 8 clicks turns into a sale. There's no way you are breaking even on ads for that book. But because through your advertising efforts, A, you've probably got a series they can go on and buy, and B, if you're doing enough, spending enough on ads, you're also probably staying in the top 100s for your subgenre, and in the also lots of other books, like in Dave Chesson was talking about in his article, you're probably ranking higher for keywords. So because you're spending that money on ads, and if they're doing pretty well, you're probably also getting a lot of organic sales as a result of that. That's a little harder when you're spending maybe $5 or $10 a day on ads. You have to experiment, you can see, but you can tell, when you go into your book report thing, am I making this many sales, and then can I attribute all those to ads in the dashboard? Probably not. You're probably getting some organic ones too. But so sometimes it can be, instead of like obsessing over the average cost of sales, just kind of look at, I'm spending whatever, $1,000 a month to advertise this book. Oh, that particular book is making $1,200 over on my dashboard. Excellent, I'm ahead. That's kind of how I do it, just to simplify things. Since I always write in series, and then everything after that going on, I know is basically gravy. So that's one way to simplify it and not make yourself too crazy. But if you love the spreadsheets and really getting in there, go for it. This is one of those things where I'm in that window where, like, I'd rather just be writing the next book, because nothing will ever have as good a return on investment for me at this point as writing the next book, probably. I'm still waiting for Netflix, to come along. I want to pick up one of my past series, so that might be more, that might make me more, who knows. Still waiting. All right, so next is our last little bit here, and then we'll answer a couple of listener questions before wrapping up. So where do we advertise? This will be pretty short. David Gaughran has a good list of promo sites, davidgaughran.com/best-promo-sites-books. I'll put it in the show notes. I know you guys are like, what? So he's got a good list of them, kind of ranked, like these are the tier 1, these are the tier 2. I regularly use BookBub if possible. They reject me plenty, and results have been kind of for me of late. So I do it because it's still, even if the results aren't as good, that $500 or whatever, it depends on your genre, is usually, I usually get more out of that still than if I was paying per click over on Facebook or Amazon ads. I like Free Booksy, Bargain Booksy. Free Booksy I think is better, has done better for me with the free one than a 99-cent one. Book Barbarian for sci-fi and fantasy, occasionally Fussy Librarian and Robin Reads. I think Book Barbarian and Robin Reads, both I want to say they're usually a couple months out, so you got to book those ones early if you want them for a launch or something. Like I said, I usually have Amazon ads running. It's generally to a book one in a more recent series for me, because for me the recent stuff is in KDP Select, so it's exclusive with Amazon. I can get the page reads and everything. It's just a little, it's not that you can't advertise wide books on Amazon, but I find it's a little easier to make it work to like I said, get enough sales to have some organic ones thrown in there too, with the stuff that is also in KU. And occasionally Facebook ads. I've given up for now on BookBub, the PPC, CPM, whatever you want, however you want to do it, they give you the option. I personally just am not any good at having to put together some graphical stuff for ads, and I can never get them to convert well enough for me. Again, it ends up being ridiculously expensive if you're bad at it. So I'm just skipping that one for now. Maybe someday I'll try it again. But what are you guys doing right now?
I refer to the same David Gaughran list for my advertising. The only thing I really do with any level of consistency is Amazon ads. Around launches, I'll take a pic of some of the things from the promo site list and do that. I'll boost the occasional Facebook post, but I've shied away from doing Facebook ads recently just because I had a harder time getting them to pay for themselves, but also a harder time. I liked the ease of determining the success of an Amazon ad versus the success of a Facebook ad, because there's a more direct connection there. So I was just, as long as I was going to doing limited amounts of ads, I was going to focus on the ones that were easier to quantify. I had some success with BookBub's pay-per-click ads for a while. I spent like 3 weeks going through and getting the correct, comp authors and stuff and really honing in. And I made them profitable, and I stopped doing it almost immediately. Not because I wasn't successful, but because I just don't advertise consistently. So I was like, all right, that's done. I'll do it again in the future. And I haven't gone back to it. Active advertising and advertising campaigns continue to be a struggle for me to do well and consistently. So I'll probably continue working on Amazon ads as my primary for the foreseeable future, with launches going to the David Gaughran list.
I forgot to tell people in my news. Oh, Lindsay, more good news. I'm not locked out of my Facebook advertising account anymore.
Yay, life is going good.
So I was able to get in there, and it's still getting 28 cents per click, which it's not the best I've ever had, but I mean, for something that's been running for 1.5 years now, I mean, that's really good. And I've got like so many comments on that and like hundreds of likes, and like that thing is, it's my sweet little baby ad. It's like, it's run almost as long as my longest running ad, which went for almost 3 years. So that's something that, I mean, I've heard a lot of the Facebook gurus say you need to check on them every single day. I'm like, I check on mine every few months, and I'm like, oh look, it's still converting. I'm like, okay, I don't need to worry about that again. And 28 cents per click. I've never had an ad run away from me. Like usually if it starts getting bad, it'll go to like 50 cents a click, and that's still not killing the bank, you know? Anyway, so, okay, that was a tangent, sorry. Anyway, back to answering the question. So I use Reading Deals, ENT Book Barbarian, Robin Reads, like basically a lot of the same that the other two use. Fussy Librarian, Book Sense, Book Cave, BK Nights, which hasn't really been good recently, so try it out, and if it don't work, don't do it again. And I also do newsletter swaps and then run Amazon ads. Actually, Nolan runs Amazon ads for me, so I don't know exactly what's going on there. Facebook ads, and I know I have at least one BookWeb ad that costs me on $3 a month. All in all, I spend about 200 to 300 on Amazon ads every month and 150 on Facebook ads currently. I would like to be spending more than that on Facebook ads, but I need to actually sit down and analyze and then put up a new ad, and it just takes time for me to figure out if the ad's working, if it's converting, and then, you know, let it run for a little while. And I like running ads to free books. I occasionally will run to a box set, and that does well for me, but those ones tend to go sour a lot easier than the free books do. And my Kalenia Chronicles books 1 through 4 box set is a perma free, and that's the one that's doing fairly decently right now. Anyway, so yeah, so that's pretty much what I'm doing with advertising right now. And yeah.
Yeah, the last time I had a Facebook ad do it really well, and I don't play with them that much. They've gotten more complicated as far as like you used to be able to do a boosted post, and I know the gurus out there were like, oh, not the boosted post, but you used to be able to like really target the audience interest and really nail down, and now they just want you to go to the ads manager and do like a real ad if you're going to do all that stuff. I was like, oh, never mind. It's like before it was just like I'll do this on a whim kind of thing, a boosted post. And I'm like, no, I'm just not that into it. You know, I had 5 minutes. I'm like, nah, I'm not going to go all up in that ads manager. But I will say maybe a comment on Joe's thing is that I find it pretty hard to start from nothing and get ads to really, really kill it. You know, as far like it's much easier if you kind of like, well, I guess we were talking about if you do it at the launch, or if you do it after like a maybe stacked promos, you know, of this sponsorship sites we were just talking about. It just seems like if you can get the book selling, then it's that much easier than you're not like having to hand sell each click of the ad or each sale from a click of the ad or the only sales you're getting. That's hard. It's really hard to get your money back. You have to be bidding quite low, and some people can make it work, but it becomes a bit of a like, how much time are you investing in this in order to only spend $5 a day and make it work? And would that time be better off writing the next book? So that's always a thing you have to consider. All right, let's do a couple of listener questions before we wrap things up. First one is from Linda. What do you do about advertising later books in a series? Aside from my newsletter and social media followers, is there any way to alert readers who haven't followed me but who have bought the first book in the series that the new one is out? I find the longer it is between books, the more difficult it is.
As I mentioned earlier, Amazon does sometimes do automatic mailings for people who picked up other stuff in your series. Apparently it can be turned off, or apparently it's only going to happen for things that are particularly successful. But that is one way that someone who picked up something earlier in your series might find out about something later in your series. Other than that, if they're not following you on social media and they're not on your newsletter, it is really very difficult to get in contact with people who even people who liked your books, that a new one is out. So yeah, it's sort of an unsolved thing when it comes to actually advertising later books in the series. I don't usually advertise later books in the series. I'll maybe do the launch push, but even then my advertising all directs to the first book in the series, and I just sort of hope that the added attention on me makes that more effective, so that people will filter through.
Yeah, pretty much your newsletter and social media followers is where it's at. If you have a large enough fan page, you can create an audience of them on Facebook and run Facebook ads to them. Also, if you've been running ads for a long time to the same audience on Facebook, you'll eventually have readers who've converted after finding your ads. And you can run an ad to the first book in your series, but have the ad copy mention that such and such book is out. Honestly, the best way though is going to be through your newsletter and advertising book one. Readers from the past who've loved your books will come across those ads and out of curiosity might click to see if they've read the newest book.
Yeah, I would say I do sometimes see people on Amazon advertising like book 8 in a series, and I kind of assume that that's who they're targeting, is the readers that are not, it's great. That's why we say, like, start a newsletter, try to get everybody on your newsletter, at least try to get them to follow you on the social media sites so that you have a way to alert them. But if you have to kind of decide how much trying to find that person is worth. But if they happen to see your ad for book 8 in Joe Ladlo's latest series, and they're like, wow, I only read up through book 5 and I like that series, you might snag them that way. I don't know, Andrea, do you do anything with the tracking pixels on Facebook? I was thinking, I'm not sure how long those last in people's histories. I have a feeling it's only 30 days or something, but it's like you could advertise on Facebook that way to somebody that's been to your site, although there's no way to. You can do it on BookFunnel. You can put a tracking pixel in, but Amazon's not going to let you put a tracking pixel on your page, unfortunately. So I guess we need somebody who is we're at the 101 level for ads. We need the 201 people to come in. How can I really effectively stalk my readers to let them know that a new book is out? Do you guys have any more thoughts on that?
I don't use a tracking pixel. I used to and then never did anything with it. It was on my website for like 5 years. I just never did anything.
All right, we'll just move on to the next question. And if anybody knows in the comments, wants to leave a comment with more suggestions on the website or the Facebook group, that'd be great.
Okay, next question is from Hannah. Should you advertise book 1 if you have nothing else out there? Some say to wait until you have 3 books out. Some say you should advertise even if you don't make a profit, just to build up a reader base. Do you lose something if you just put it out there and wait to have other books until you start to advertise? And this is sort of what this entire episode was about. I usually do at least some advertising on the first book. Normally it'll be smaller one-punch things like boosted posts, featured posts, and like the launch style stuff we talked about earlier. And then I start doing standard ads like Facebook and Amazon ads on book 1 after book 2 comes out, like sort of what I'll refer to as maintenance ads. I don't usually start until book 2 comes out, because the higher chance for income can offset the higher cost of running things a little bit more regularly.
Honestly, at this point, it just depends on you and what your expectations are and how your finances are doing. Building a readership is always a good idea, but only if it's through newsletter subscribers, because it's too hard to keep them excited about your books if you don't have a way to contact them directly for subsequent books. Even then, I mean, it can still be hard to get them excited, but you build up excitement you just have to have a newsletter letter to build up that excitement for later books. If your finances are okay, you could put book 1 up as a perm free, then run a $5 a day Facebook ad to it to generate downloads, which gradually lead to reviews. You can also do that if you have a 99-cent book or a full price book. It all depends on what your goals are, what your expectations are, and what your finances are. If you don't have a whole lot of finances, then ads probably would not be a good idea, just because it costs a lot of money to figure out how to do them. But say running like Book Barbarian or Robin Reads or ENT or something like that would work. I don't personally do a whole lot of anything big with one book release. Like in my new pen name with the new series, I've only got 2 books out under there, and I don't really want to run huge promotions just yet, just because I need to get through my surgery first, and then I'd like to start writing book 2 and all that stuff. And now that my nanny's marrying my brother, I need to have somebody come in and help with the kids once or twice a week again for an hour or 2. Anyway, so yeah.
Right. We kind of talked about how it might be worth doing at the launch if you haven't yet launched this, for a couple weeks, running some ads just to see, if you do enough, if Amazon kind of helps you out. Again, we don't really know. David didn't talk about the other sites, so I couldn't say for sure that I've had a similar experience. I sometimes feel like books will stay sticky longer on some of the other sites after a promo, but I'm not sure that's kind of quite the thing, is like how honeymoon effect at the launch. Maybe we'll try to get somebody from the Wide from the Wind Facebook group who's really studied up on the other sites a little more. But yeah, it's hard. It's hard to make money. It's hard to make the advertising work when it's hard to make money, guys. Just in general, it's hard to make money unless you can sell an NFT for your $1 million. But yeah, with just one book, it's hard to come out on top, like I was talking about earlier. You know, it's often the sell through to the rest of the series. That's where a lot of people get positive. But yeah, if you have the money, you can experiment with it. Do make sure if you are going to advertise and you only have one book out, to have a sign up for your newsletter in the back. Again, if you can give them something to entice them, you know, to get on the list better. And, or I would say, and if at all possible, the pre-order for the next book up, even if it's a year out, because now you can do year out pre-orders, I think, in all the stores. So just to kind of lock them in, and so they won't forget about you in the meantime, because you want to not spend $10 to get a reader and only have one book out. But if you know, if you can get them into the series, keep the ball rolling, then in that case, maybe it's worth it. All right, next question is for Andrea to ask.
Okay. Lisa, that's the name of my sister. It's not the same Lisa. What do you do when the ads or audiences you were using suddenly seem to tank out of nowhere?
Panic and despair is what I usually default to. When your audiences that you've been sort of depending upon sort of go away, it can be a good sign that it's maybe a good idea to try a new series, or to just go in a different direction. Just give your current readers, who might be a little bit burnt out on your current stuff, you know, a new thing to sink their teeth into, or just to see if potentially you can reach a new audience. Other times, it's a sign you should try revising your targeting on the ads that you've been using. Just, you can exhaust an ad population. So yeah, if you just look at your targeting, and honestly, it could still be good targeting. It just, all of the people that targeting applied to have either decided to buy or not to buy your stuff. And you could also try doing some cross promo. In this case, if you can get some, you know, another writer's audience involved, then you suddenly have a fresh new audience to pull from. So that's some stuff you can do.
So I would recommend taking a break from that book or that series and advertise something else. If there's nothing else to advertise, you can switch things up. So like change images and add copy and see if something new will spark interest again. But a lot of the time when this happens, it's because audiences get tired of seeing ads, and every audience will eventually run its course.
The first thing I would do, because I've had this happen before, is go in and check and see if like what you're bidding, like chances are from month to month, the max bids and suggested bids will change. Maybe all of a sudden it's like, oh, it's urban fantasy month, and all of a sudden you got to bid 25 cents more to even get any play in that genre. So I would kind of check that. You may need to change the bids. And it's okay to go down too, because sometimes I will find, like, if you're getting emails from Amazon about how you're going over your budget like every day, you're like, maybe I should try bidding a little less, because they're showing those, they're going through those, and I might be able to get away with spending a little less. Don't do what Amazon says and just go and raise your budget, because they will happily take your money, but you could be spending a fortune on that. So just check what the bids are going for, see if that's changed, and then you might have to, if you want to keep advertising that one, try targeting different audiences. Maybe it's time to bring in a new keyword list if you're doing author keywords or book titles or whatever you're doing. And you may also want to just try new ads. This is especially if you're somebody that writes copy. I don't know if we're actually talking about Amazon ads specifically, but that's where my brain went. So if you write copy, maybe it's time to write some different copy, start a new ad, you know, start fresh. In general, you know, it may be that again, I never know, you know, and I feel this way too. Like sometimes you'll get, if you just take a break for 6 months, like Joe and Andrea were saying, and come back to it, it'll be fresh again. It won't be all over the store, and it'll start getting more clicks. But there are so many people shopping in the Amazon store that I don't actually know if that's true. It's not like the same people come on every day. It's people finish the series that they've been working on for the last 2 months, and then they come on, and so they're seeing something, even if they, you know, it could be a while since they saw it. So, but yeah, I do agree that sometimes it does seem to be like they're just, everybody's seeing your book that happens to be shopping in that category that month. So that's just how it is. If you have another series, maybe try that for a while. Or if you have a box set, or you're thinking I might put together a box set, maybe you turn off the ads to your book one, and instead start advertising the box set. Maybe you want to run a sale on that at the same time. So options. All right. Do you guys have anything else you want to say? I think we're going to wrap because we've been over an hour. So we have so many questions on this topic. We'll plan to revisit this. We have a couple of interviews coming up, but we'll do a part 2 on this stuff.
The only thing I have to say is I turned blue anyway because I'm using only white lights, nothing warming in here.
It's hard. I've been like weirdly in the shadows I have like dining room lights. Joe's always, just fine with his cabinet behind him. All right, I guess Joe is nodding that he is ready to end the show. So thank you, everyone. Thank you for the questions in the Facebook group. Thank you for listening. And thank you to Joshua Pearson for producing the show. You can find the show notes or leave a comment or question at sixfigureauthors.com with the number 6. Bye-bye.
See y'all later.
So long, everybody.